It's finally Friday.
It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show, presented this week by Woodbine's Gray Stakes, this Sunday, October 1st. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. We're glad you could join us. Coming up, is there too much focus on the Breeders' Cup to the detriment of some of the prep races leading up to it? We'll talk about that. But first, Ray, let's give the industry a hand. Some big congratulations in order this week as these new IRS and Treasury regulations take effect that will benefit horse players, and they will benefit the entire industry in several ways. But I think congratulations is in order first.
God likes me! He really, really likes me! Wow, what a day! What a day! What a fabulous day! Woo! I'm having a fabulous day!
Ray, we're always talking about how the industry needs to work together, and here is a case where they actually did, and they got something done in Washington, D.C., no less. So we got to give props.
Yeah, this is 99 to 1 shot, right? To get people in Washington, D.C. to agree to something the horse industry wants. In recent years, they've done tax things for owners and breeders and that sort of thing. But this is for horse players, and it benefits, as you said, everyone by changing the withholding and reporting regulations of the U.S. Treasury. More money effectively is going to be bet into racing, because when you cash a big ticket, they're not taking a whack out of it. They're not having you report it as income because of the new regulations. And you're going to bet more because of what you win. You're also going to bet more going in because the way the new rules interpret what is a bet or what is the size of a bet. And you can take us through that part of it.
Yeah, just really quickly, there will be a little bit of an education process because it's going to be different on track versus online, and that's not the case now. So under the new rules, if you are on track, previously you wanted to divvy up your tickets into the smallest increments possible. You know, if you were playing a trifecta, you didn't want to play a $10 trifecta. You wanted to play a $1 trifecta 10 times. That is going away. If you're on track, you want to put as much as possible on one ticket.
Right.
Because, again, now the trigger is the 300 times your wager. So let's say you bet $50 to win. Under the old rules, it would trigger at $5,000 no matter what. Now it only triggers at 300 times your wager, which in this case would be $15,000. So that is a much higher threshold. But if you're online, you can still divvy up your tickets if you're playing multiple tickets for a pick six or something, and it will all, as long as it's the same pool, the ADW will aggregate all that into one. So you don't have to put them all on one ticket. The reason on track is different is because they don't want people gathering up their friends' tickets and putting them together, or stooping and putting tickets together to create a different wager. So that's the reason it's different.
Well, and the big part of this is if you played $1,000 ticket for a pick six, for example, and you hit, if the base wager was a $2 bet, they would do the 300 to 1 based on that being a $2 investment, not a $1,000 investment. Right. So in the old days, it was all based on, did it pay 300 times whatever the base wager is? Now it's got to pay 300 times whatever you put into the pool on that one ticket, or online. If you made multiple tickets, you had a saver ticket, that sort of thing, you could combine them online for the combined amount would have to be 300 to 1 before they reported it to the IRS.
Right. Again, 300 times your wager, not
right.
300 to 1. Because again, to your point, it used to be 300 times the base amount. Now it's 300 times your wager, which dramatically will reduce the number of tickets that are withheld and that need to be reported to the IRS, which reduces paperwork for the government. It reduces paperwork for the tellers at the racetrack. It reduces paperwork for the ADWs. It saves a lot of time. It puts more money into horse players' pockets. And let me just point out that this is not just a short-term effort. This started really 11 years ago as a legislative effort. They tried to go through Congress, the horse racing industry groups tried to go through Congress several times. It didn't work. Surprise, surprise. But a few people had the brilliant idea of, well, let's try a regulatory change. And that's where they put their focus. And it was a smart decision. It was a clever idea, and it worked. So other industries might want to pay attention to what happened here, because this is a success story.
Yeah, a lot of credit to people like Stephen Christ and Andy Beyer, who are advocates for this for many years. The NTRA did a really good job. They had a lobbying group in D.C., but also horse players everywhere. They were asked to write letters, encouraging the Treasury Department, IRS to change the regulations, and that played a part too. So this was really, as you said, an effort across all boundaries in the horse industry, and it's going to help everybody. People are going to play bigger tickets. It's going to increase the handle, and that's good for not just the horse players, but it's good for the racetracks, good for the horse owners in the way of increased purses. So this is a really, really big deal.
How do you think this will affect your wagering? Take the poll on our website and let us know your thoughts at PaulickReport.com. Ray, moving on, the Breeders' Cup, can you believe it, is only about a month away, and we're entering this weekend one of those big prep weekends, traditionally with Super Saturday, lots of races that lead into the Breeders' Cup, final preps. But if I'm not mistaken, in looking at some of the Breeders' Cup races coming up, a lot of the favorites aren't in this weekend's races. In fact, they're training up to the big event. And I feel like that is something that is starting to evolve. Do you think it's a problem?
We've seen this happen with the Triple Crown. The number of prep races for the leading contenders for the Triple Crown is reduced. The time between races has been extended. It's I think the new reality for the Triple Crown, and I'm afraid it's becoming the new reality for Breeders' Cup too. Some horsemen say their horses run better fresh. Sometimes I think the pressure is on owners because they're looking at their horse as an asset, and they don't want to lose a race. They don't want to lose a prep race. They're putting all their eggs in the basket of the Breeders' Cup. And can anything be done about it? Well, you don't want to tell someone what to do with their horse. You'd like to think trainers know what's best for the horse. But in terms of the game, I think it does hurt not to have the best horses in these prep races that are coming up.
Yeah, there again is that conflict with the breeding industry and the other side of the career for these horses, which is the breeding shed. It seems to always be in conflict with what fans would like to see, which is they want to see the stars. They want to see the stars more often. I mean, you've got to appreciate a horse like Winx in Australia, who's racing, 7 times this year already. She raced 8 times last year. She's headed for 9 this year. So and then Australian fans, of course, appreciate that because they're getting to see her quite often at different racetracks. This weekend, looking at the big races, we're missing some of the stars, and I think it's tough, and it's not long term. I don't think it's good for the industry, and I know these horses, a lot of them can handle it, and they've done studies about racing more often makes them more sound. So I don't know if I agree with some of the philosophies that I see in place here in American racing, where they back off so much on putting horses in competitive races. I mean, I think they should, that's what they want to do. The horses want to run. Give them a chance.
Yeah, old timers would use races to get horses ready for the race that they're really trying to win. That doesn't mean they're not going to win a prep race, but it just means you can't. As Horatio Laurel used to say, the great trainer, you can't squeeze the lemon dry, but you can use races to get ready for bigger races, and you can still win those races. You just can't have a horse at its best 6 times or 8 times a year. You can have them at their best a couple times of the year, but you can use the other races to get them ready for their best effort.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's sort of like Orson Welles, those old commercials for Paul Masson.
We will sell no wine before it's time.
I think American trainers have sort of adopted that philosophy when it comes to horses. Well, you got any this weekend You got anybody you're particularly keen on?
Bob Baffert has won the last 3 Breeders' Cup Classics, and he's going to have maybe 4, maybe 5 in this year's field. He's got Cupid running in the Awesome again, along with Moptahij. I think Cupid is going to run a huge race. He's another one who's been very lightly raced this year. He's going to go into the Breeders' Cup Classic, Baffert is, with an incredibly strong hand. And if he can win 4 in a row, we're going to have to start comparing this to the streak that Woody Stevens had with all those Belmonts in the 1980s, 5 in a row.
He could have 4 horses in that race. He could have a third of the field with Collected and Arrogate and West Coast and Cupid. A lot of them training up to the race like we just talked about. I've got one I really like in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic at Belmont. That is Sadler's Joy. He just seems to me a horse. He's 4 years old. He loves the 1.5 miles, and he comes from behind. He's an exciting horse. I think the fans could get behind a horse like that. And I think he's got a really good shot to win. Sadler's Joy for me in the Turf Classic will be my one pick this weekend. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show, presented by Woodbine's Grace Stakes. Don't miss that. That's this Sunday. That's always a great 2-year-old race. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.